Title: She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. The forest never gave back what it took. That's what they always said in Elkridge. When people disappeared into the pines, the search parties came back empty. No footprints, no bodies, just silence so heavy it bent your shoulders. But Ellie wasn't like the others. Her brother, Caleb, had vanished 2 weeks ago. He was smart, strong, and knew the woods better than anyone. He didn't get lost. He was taken. The local sheriff mumbled something about cougars. The game warden said it might have been a sinkhole or a fall, but Ellie had seen the photos. His tent shredded, blood on the trees, but no trail, no drag marks, no body, just gone. So Ellie went into the forest with her hunting rifle, a flashlight, and the last thing Caleb had ever given her, a worn leather bracelet braided with twine and a coyote tooth. She hiked in under a dull, sickle moon. The trees grew too close together. The air smelled too sweet, like rot-wearing perfume. By midnight, the forest grew strange. No crickets, no wind, just the crack of her boots and the hum of something watching. She found his campsite, exactly as they'd left it, blood on the bark, torn tarp flapping like a dying breath. Ellie knelt and ran her hand over the dried blood. "I'm here, Caleb," she whispered. "I'm gonna kill whatever did this to you." Then something moved behind her. She spun, rifle up, and froze. A figure stepped from the trees. Tall, barefoot, covered in dirt. It was Caleb. "Ellie?" he croaked. She aimed the rifle square at his chest. It was his face. Same eyes, same crooked smile, same scar under the chin from when they'd built the treehouse and he'd fallen. But it couldn't be, he was dead. "I know how this looks," he said, voice trembling, "but it's me." "No," Ellie said, "you're not him. You're the thing that took him." "I remember when we used to sneak honey from Mom's pantry," he said. "You'd pretend to be the queen bee. I called you Ellybug." Her grip loosened. "I remember the night before I left for college," he continued, stepping forward. "You cried and made me promise I'd come back. I broke that promise, but I didn't mean to." Ellie's stomach twisted. It sounded like him. It smelled like him. But then she saw the movement. The shimmer under his skin, like heat waves on asphalt, like something was wearing him. "You're not him," she whispered. The thing's face faltered. It smiled, but wrong this time. Too wide, the teeth too many. "I was," it said, "a long time ago." "What are you?" It tilted its head. "I am memory, hunger, regret. I wear the ones you loved so you'll feed me more." Ellie raised her rifle. "Then you made a mistake showing me his face." The thing didn't flinch. It only stepped forward. "You've already forgotten," it said softly. "You left him that night. You ran away when you heard his scream." Ellie staggered. "No. He called for you, again and again, but you ran." She felt the bracelet grow heavy on her wrist. I didn't know what took him." The creature touched its chest. "I took his face, but I kept his fear. It's inside me now. Would you like to hear how he screamed?" "Shut up," she shouted. The woods echoed. And then, softer now, it said, "You don't want revenge. You want to forget, but I'm the one who remembers." Tears ran down her cheek as she pulled the trigger. The rifle fired, but the thing didn't fall. It only smiled. And walked closer. As it opened its arms, Ellie dropped her weapon and backed away. "Ellybug," it whispered, voice breaking like old ice. "Please, just remember." The last thing she saw before the dark swallowed her was Caleb's face, begging through borrowed skin. They never found her body. Just her rifle. And a bracelet braided with twine and a coyote tooth, wrapped around a tree like a noose. In Elkridge, the forest still doesn't give back what it takes. But sometimes, it gives back what you fear the most. Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. When Ellie opened her eyes, the forest was gone. She stood in a clearing, but there were no trees, no sky, just a shifting black above her head, like ink stirred in water. The ground pulsed faintly beneath her boots, soft as flesh, warm as breath. She turned slowly. The thing still wore Caleb's face, but now it flickered. A shimmer here, a slip there. His eyes would melt into pitch-black voids, then return. His voice echoed oddly now, like many throats trying to speak through one mouth. You remember, it said. No, Ellie whispered. Liar. The thing touched her forehead with one long, trembling finger. The warmth jolted through her like lightning. Suddenly, she was 10 years old, crouched behind the shed with Caleb, both of them holding stolen popsicles. The sun was warm. The air smelled like cut grass and motor oil. He leaned over and whispered, "When I'm gone, promise you won't forget me." She gasped. The thing smiled. Then another memory crashed in. It wasn't hers. She saw through Caleb's eyes, stumbling through the woods, blood pouring from his shoulder, something behind him screaming in a voice that wasn't human. Then, blackness. And pain. And a mouth opening where no mouth should be. The memory snapped like a twig. Ellie collapsed to her knees. What did you do to him? The thing knelt too, its too many limbs folding in a tangle of shadows. I became him. That's how I survive. I wear what you grieve. Why me? She asked, trembling. Because you remember better than anyone. She stared at it. And for a heartbeat, she saw her brother again. Not a monster, not a mask. Just him, scared, alone, dying in the dark. Tears streamed down her face. Then let me remember all of him, not just the pain. The thing recoiled as if slapped, its Caleb face twisted. No, it hissed. You only remember what hurts. That's what feeds me. That's what keeps me alive. Then I'll starve you, Ellie said, rising slowly. I'll remember the joy, the light, the laughter, everything but the fear. The ground trembled. The sky screamed. The thing lunged, but this time, Ellie didn't run. She stood tall, eyes burning. I remember the way he laughed when he beat me at chess. I remember the song he sang when he thought no one was listening. I remember him living, not dying. The creature shrieked. Its skin cracked like porcelain. Memories poured from it, hundreds of them. Thousands, not all hers. Faces, names, screams, smiles, all spiraling into the air like ash caught in wind. Ellie screamed, too, not in fear, but in fury. Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 3, The Hollow Path. Ellie didn't speak about the forest for months. She returned to town hollow-eyed, carrying the silence with her like a second skin. People looked at her with sympathy, another mourner, another sibling swallowed by Elkridge's endless woods. But no one asked questions. They never did, because everyone feared what they might hear. She moved back into her childhood home, alone. Her parents had died years ago, her mother in her sleep, her father by his own hand the winter after Caleb vanished. She scrubbed the bloodstains from the wood floor, the ones that never quite faded. She unpacked boxes of old photographs and hung them again, one by one. But one photo went untouched. The one of Caleb, aged 12, standing at the edge of the woods. He was smiling, but the shadows behind him were too thick, and when Ellie stared too long, the trees in the photo seemed to shift. Then the dreams began. She saw the forest again, but changed, twisted, its branches bent inward, forming tunnels, paths that breathed. Something called to her. Not the thing that wore Caleb's face. Not hunger. But memory. One night, she woke up with her hand bleeding. She'd been gripping the burned bracelet in her sleep again. It had cracked open like an eggshell, and inside was something she didn't remember putting there. A tiny tooth. Not a coyote's, human. And engraved into it, small and uneven, were 3 letters, E.C.L. Ellie Caleb Lane. Their initials. The next morning, she packed a bag, not with weapons this time, not with revenge, but with candles, chalk, the old compass from Caleb's hiking kit, and the tooth. She wasn't going back to destroy anything. She was going back to find him. The forest didn't resist this time. It welcomed her. The wind whispered her name like a lullaby. The path under her feet lit up with old memories, places she and Caleb had played, hunted, hid. But the deeper she went, the stranger it became. She stepped through a curtain of hanging moss and entered a space between places. The trees formed doorways, each leading to a different moment. She passed a clearing where her mother wept under the stars. A hollow tree where her father whispered to a photograph. A frozen stream reflecting her own face at age 6, tears running silently. Then finally, a mirror of the night Caleb vanished. She saw it again. The torn tent. The blood. The shape behind the trees. But this time, she saw him too. Caleb. Half-formed, half-devoured. Trapped in the memory. He turned to her, and his eyes were no longer black. They were his. "Ellie," he said, voice thin as paper, "I'm stuck in the path. The thing took me, but not all of me." She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "I came back. I remember you. That's the only way," he whispered. "Memories, they're the only door in or out. If you forget me, I'm gone forever." Ellie reached into her pack and pulled out the tooth. She held it high. "I never forgot." The forest shuddered. Light spilled from the roots of the trees like golden blood. The memory cracked. Caleb screamed, not in pain, but in release. And then, he stepped out of the moment. Real, whole, alive. Ellie collapsed into him, sobbing, "I'm sorry I ran." He held her tighter. "You came back. That's what matters." They left the forest together. It did not try to stop them. Because it had learned, there is power in pain, yes, but there is greater power in remembering love. Years later, when people in Elkridge ask why the forest feels quieter now, why fewer people go missing, why the wind sometimes carries the sound of soft laughter and not screaming, Ellie Lane only smiles. She and Caleb live in the old house. The photo of him at 12 still hangs there. But now, when you look closely, the trees don't shift. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, you don't hear crying. You hear peace. And the whisper of a brother and sister who remembered each other enough to break the curse. To be continued. Would you like the story to continue into a deeper myth, perhaps about the origin of the creature? Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 4, The One Beneath the Roots. They tried to live normal lives after that. But the forest wouldn't let go entirely. Some nights, Ellie woke to find Caleb standing at the window, staring into the dark. Other nights, she heard whispers beneath the floorboards, not evil, just echoes, faint memories that hadn't faded yet. Caleb said he still felt it inside him, not the creature, something older, something that had used the hunger like a puppet. "I saw it," he whispered one night. "Not when I was taken, after, when I was trapped in the memory." Ellie sat on the porch beside him, the stars smothered by clouds. "What did you see?" He looked at her, voice thin, "The one beneath the roots." She said nothing, but the name settled into her bones like cold. They started digging. Not metaphorically, literally. Caleb remembered a place, a stone altar buried deep in the oldest part of the woods, where nothing grew and the trees twisted in spirals that defied nature. It wasn't on any map. But they found it. By following the silence. No birds, no insects. Just an ancient clearing choked by black moss and standing stones that leaned inward like teeth. In the center, they uncovered the altar. It was made of petrified wood and bone, layers of fossilized creatures twisted into impossible shapes. And carved into its surface was the same symbol that had been etched into Caleb's mind since he returned. A spiral of roots encircling a single, staring eye. Ellie reached out. Her fingers brushed the stone. And then, the ground opened. They fell into a void. Down, 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 until the forest above became a distant memory. They landed on soil that pulsed like skin. The roots above them curled like ribs, and beneath their feet, something breathed. A massive form sat curled in the blackness. Its limbs were too long. Its face had no mouth, just that single, unblinking eye in the center of its head. Not rage. Not hunger. Not even sentience in the human sense. Just awareness. It saw them. And in seeing them, it remembered them. "You are not of this cycle," it said, not in sound, but in thought that scraped across their skulls. "You broke the pattern." Ellie stepped forward. "What are you?" It did not lie. "I am the root, the first loss, The forgotten grief. I feed on what you bury and pretend to forget. Caleb gritted his teeth. You trapped me. Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 5. The Rot That Remembers. A cosmic horror continuation. The world changed quietly after the one beneath the roots unraveled. For most, it was subtle. A sudden memory returning during sleep. A missing relative showing up at their doorstep with fog in their eyes and time missing from their bones. An old grief finally lifting, unexplainable and strange. But for Ellie and Caleb, it wasn't over. Because they began to dream of other forests. Forests with no sun. Where the roots whispered in languages no human had spoken. Where figures moved not on legs, but on tendrils of memory. And always, something watched from the dark. It started with a letter. Unmarked envelope, no return address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, old, cracked. A group of explorers, standing in front of a dead tree wider than a house. Behind them, carved into the bark, the spiral. The eye at its center watching, even from the faded ink. And on the back, scribbled in smudged handwriting. Another one has woken. You cracked the root. Now the others remember too. A friend who also escaped. Caleb looked at Ellie. What does it mean? Ellie's face was pale. I think we were just the beginning. They traced the photo to a long-abandoned expedition in the Pacific Northwest from the 1930s, an archaeological team that vanished without a trace. Rumors said they were studying memory cults, but records were sealed or burned. Ellie found one surviving journal page, archived deep online, only viewable as a water-stained scan. It is not just one entity. Each region holds its own root. Some feed on grief, others on guilt, others still on forgotten joy. The spiral connects them. They are not gods, not demons. They are older. They are what grows in the places we refuse to look. Caleb circled 3 words. Forgotten joy feeds them. We thought only pain gave them strength, he murmured. Ellie shook her head. No, it's all memory. Everything we abandon or bury. Anything left unlived. The next dream came stronger. Ellie stood in a marsh at night. The sky was the wrong color, reddish-gray, with stars that pulsed instead of shone. A figure stood across the water. It had no face, only mouths, endless mouths, whispering every version of her life that never happened. Her unborn child. The kiss she never gave. The life she never lived because Caleb had disappeared. And then the figure said, I am the rot that remembers, and I am waking. She bolted upright. Caleb was already in the hallway, pale, trembling. I saw it too. They weren't alone. Across the globe, others were dreaming the same dreams. An old woman in Norway spoke to reporters about the tree that eats names. A child in Argentina screamed herself hoarse after drawing the spiral over and over in her sleep. A man in Nigeria built a shrine of bones in the middle of a city street, claiming he'd been inside the root. And somewhere in Alaska, a group of hikers stumbled into a cave made entirely of spines, wrapped in living moss that whispered their regrets. The root creatures were connected, and something had rippled through all of them. Ellie's act of remembrance had not just freed Caleb. It had woken the others. We need to find the source, Caleb said one night, hunched over maps and records. The spiral connects them. There has to be an origin. Ellie stared at the photo again, the one from the 1930s. This time she noticed something she hadn't before. A shape in the background, barely visible in the fog. A tree the size of a mountain. They began to plan a journey, not into one forest, but across many. Places where the spiral had appeared throughout history. The Black Forest of Germany. The ancient cedar groves of Japan. The dream-haunted tundra of Siberia. Because if these creatures were waking, if the rot that remembers was rising, then someone had to stand against them. And only the ones who remembered what was lost, what was loved, had any chance of survival. To be continued. Would you like the next part to follow Ellie and Caleb's first encounter with one of the other roots, perhaps in a haunted German forest where joy itself is being consumed? Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 6, The Forest That Ate Joy. Set in the Schwarzwald, Germany. Ellie had never known silence could be so loud. The Black Forest, Schwarzwald, wasn't supposed to feel like this. Tourists came for fairy tales and cuckoo clocks. Hikers talked about dense pines and quiet paths. But the part she and Caleb entered didn't exist on any map. It was whispered about in old village folklore as Freudenwald, the Forest of Joy. A cursed grove where people didn't scream. They just forgot how to smile. They found it by accident. Or maybe it found them. A local librarian in Baden-Baden had taken pity on their questions. She was old, nearly blind, and smelled like paper and cloves. When Caleb mentioned the spiral and the route beneath the forest, her hands trembled. "My sister went there," she whispered. She laughed every day until the day she went in, came back 3 hours later, never laughed again, not once, not even as she died. She gave them a page from an old journal, handwritten in looping German script. The final line stood out. "It does not take your pain, it takes your happiness. It feeds on what made you human." Freudenwald was colder than the rest of the forest, not in temperature, but in feeling. The moment they passed beneath the crooked arch of rotted birch trees, Ellie felt her breath catch. Memories began to slip away, not the painful ones, the bright ones. The sound of her mother humming while baking bread. The feeling of swinging beside Caleb, sun on their faces. The way her first dog used to wag its tail in wide, frantic circles. She turned to Caleb, pale. "Do you feel that?" He nodded. "I can't remember what made me laugh yesterday." Ellie gripped his wrist tightly. "Say something happy, right now." He blinked. I had a dream once. I was flying over a beach. You were there, laughing." "Hold on to that," she said. "Don't let it go." As they walked deeper, the trees grew warped. Branches curled like claws, bark peeled like old skin. And beneath every step, the ground sighed, as if it mourned every joy it had devoured. Then the whispering began. Not in words, but emotions. Like someone flipping through the channels of forgotten childhoods. A birthday party. A first kiss. A baby's giggle. Then silence. Then again. A wedding toast. A joke shared in a hospital room. A father catching his son in the rain. Each flicker of memory twisted into a whimper as it passed, then vanished. "I don't like this," Caleb said. "This forest isn't just feeding, it's starving." At the heart of the grove, they found it. A tree that looked like it had been weeping sap for centuries, its roots curled around piles of broken toys, photographs, rusted wedding rings, all offerings, all drained. And at its base, carved deep into the trunk, the spiral. But this one had something new. Instead of an eye at the center, it had a mouth. Grinning, too wide, carved in pain. Ellie stepped closer, and suddenly her chest ached. Not with fear. With loss. She could feel it trying to reach inside her, pull out the last flicker of happiness she had left. The memory of Caleb's laugh. The sound of her name in her mother's voice. The warmth of waking up without sorrow. "Don't listen," Caleb said, falling to his knees. "It's taking everything." Ellie reached into her pack and pulled out something she hadn't thought about in years, a cassette recorder. It was old, battery-powered, and in it was one tape. Caleb at age 9, singing Twinkle Twinkle off-key while Ellie giggled in the background. She pressed play. The forest screamed. Not in rage, but in hunger denied. The laughter echoed through the trees like a weapon. The spiral mouth cracked, sap bled like black tears, and the memories began to return. One by one, they fell from the branches like autumn leaves. A child's first joke. A grandmother's bedtime story. A boy dancing alone in his room. Ellie shouted through the storm, "You don't get to take what we choose to remember." She slammed the cassette player against the roots. The laughter grew louder, brighter, real. The mouth on the tree shrieked, and then it split open. From the hollow center spilled golden mist. Not light, not fog. Joy. Pure, unfiltered, unforgotten. When it was over, the grove was still. The spiral remained, but the mouth was gone. And in its place, for the first time in recorded history, Freudenwald bloomed. Wildflowers, songbirds, the scent of honey in the air. They left the Black Forest changed. Not haunted. Healed. And they knew now. Every root had a hunger. But it was up to humanity what they fed it. To be continued. Would you like the next part to move into Japan's haunted cedar groves, where the root there doesn't feed on sorrow or joy, but on lies? Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 7. The Root That Feeds on Lies. Set in Akigahara, Japan. They flew into Narita under a different name. Ellie and Caleb had learned that too much truth, too much attention, only drew eyes they didn't want watching. They weren't alone in the fight anymore. Messages had started arriving. Scattered notes, ancient diagrams, encrypted emails signed only with those who remember. There were others. Some broken. Some awakened. Some already lost. But all of them drawn to the same truth. The spirals are waking. And each spiral root feeds on what humanity throws away. Akigahara, the Sea of Trees, was infamous for what it took. People called it the suicide forest. But that wasn't the full truth. It didn't just take lives. It took lies. The first step into the forest was like walking into padded silence. The trees were so tightly packed that even the wind didn't speak. Ellie felt it immediately, a pressure behind her eyes. It wasn't trying to scare her. It was trying to strip her down. Every secret she'd ever kept. Every white lie. Every unspoken guilt. I said I was fine when I wasn't. I said I didn't blame him. I said I let go. They all echoed back in her own voice. She staggered. Caleb grabbed her shoulder. It's the root. I can feel it. It doesn't feed on sorrow or happiness. It feeds on what we hide from ourselves. The deeper they walked, the stranger it became. They passed people, faces blank, eyes vacant, wandering paths that led nowhere. Not ghosts. Not fully alive either. Just hollowed. Worn down by self-deceit until the forest made them forget what truth ever felt like. One man sat beside a tree, whispering into a cassette recorder. I didn't love her, I just didn't want to be alone. I told my daughter she mattered, but I didn't mean it. I never saw the crash, I lied in court. Over and over, a tape of confessions no one would hear. Caleb whispered, they're feeding it. Every lie they tell to survive becomes its meal. They found the root just before dusk. It wasn't a tree, it was a mirror. Rough, silvered bark curved like glass, its surface reflected not just your image, but the truth underneath. When Ellie looked into it, she didn't see herself. She saw a younger version, crying at Caleb's empty bed, tearing up her journal, screaming into her pillow that she didn't care anymore. She saw the lie she'd lived ever since. That she had been strong, that she hadn't wanted to give up too. She stepped back, choking. Behind her, Caleb stared at his reflection. He whispered, I always said you'd be okay without me. I think part of me hoped you wouldn't be. The mirror shivered. A low hum filled the clearing, like the beginning of a storm. Then the spiral emerged. Etched into the dirt, surrounding the mirror like a ritual. And from the ground, it grew. The root of lies. Not bark, not bone, but a twisting, fibrous web of ink-black truths, crawling up into the air like veins of shadow. It spoke not with a voice, but with doubt. Say it again. Say you're fine. Say you never needed each other. Ellie gritted her teeth. No. The shadows writhed. Lie to me, and I will let you go. Caleb whispered, don't. That's how it binds. She stepped forward, heart pounding. I do need him. I always did. The root hissed. Caleb stepped beside her. I wasn't ready to die. I told myself I was. That's the lie that trapped me. The mirror cracked. More, it hissed. Ellie reached into her coat and pulled out a folded page, her old journal, torn out the night Caleb vanished. She had written one sentence, over and over, like a spell. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. And then, she burned it. The paper flared in the cold air. The root shrieked. Not in pain. In starvation. It couldn't feed anymore. They had stripped themselves bare. And in that moment, Ellie whispered, I know the truth now, and I forgive myself. The mirror shattered. The root curled into itself and crumbled, turning to ash like dried leaves. The forest brightened, not with light, but with clarity. The hollowed people blinked. Some sat, some wept, a few began to smile, as if waking from a long, hard dream. And over it all, the wind began to speak again. Back at the edge of the forest, Ellie turned to Caleb. That's 3. He nodded, but the spiral isn't finished. She opened a leather-bound notebook filled with maps, symbols, and scars. There were more circles. More regions. More routes. The ones that fed on regret. The ones that fed on hate. And the one, rumored to be at the edge of Antarctica, that fed on the fear of being forgotten. Ellie drew a line from Aokigahara to the bottom of the world. We stop it there. Caleb nodded, the wind brushing the spiral scar still faint on his wrist. Let's end this. To be continued. Would you like the next part to journey into the route in Antarctica, where the forest is frozen, and the fear of being forgotten takes monstrous form? Continuation. She went into the woods to hunt what killed her brother, but the thing wore his face and begged her to remember. Part 8. The frozen route at the end of the world, set in the Ross Ice Shelf, Antarctica. They followed the spiral south. Farther than maps could guide. Farther than most dared even dream. The trail led them beyond the veil of forests and into the cold void where no trees grow at all, yet still, somehow, something roots itself. Antarctica. Ross Ice Shelf. Where even silence shivers. Here, beneath the endless white sky and screaming wind, something ancient slumbers. Not dead. Not dreaming. Simply, waiting. Ellie and Caleb came with a private expedition, 3 researchers, 2 weather-beaten dogs, and an old Norwegian cartographer named Soren who claimed to have seen the spiral in his dreams since childhood. They're all connected, he said on the second night, warming his hands by a flickering camp stove. The roots, the mouth, the mirror, they all spiral in toward this place. Caleb leaned in. You think this is the source? Soren nodded, slowly. No, not the source, the last one, the oldest, the one the others whisper about, the one they're all trying not to become. Ellie frowned. What does it feed on? Soren's eyes were hollow. The fear of being forgotten. They reached the anomaly on the 6th day. GPS failed, compasses spun. The snow fell upward. And then, stopped entirely. A perfect circle in the ice. Windless. Soundless. Wrong. At its center, half buried in blue-white frost, was a spire of black ice, smooth as obsidian and humming with an impossible heartbeat. No symbols, no spiral, no warning. Just the feeling that stepping closer would erase everything you'd ever been. Caleb approached first. The air bent around him, distorting his outline. Ellie shouted, but the words froze before they reached him. He turned and looked at her, confused. Then terrified. Ellie, who are you? She sprinted to him. As she crossed the invisible threshold, her mind split. Memories dropped from her like leaves. Her birthday last year. Her mother's face. The taste of summer strawberries. Gone. Each step was a bargain. Each second, something precious forgotten. She grabbed Caleb's hand. Hold on to me. They closed their eyes and stepped forward together. What met them was not a route. It was a hollow. A massive, empty cavity under the ice, miles wide, lined with veins of shadow and memory. Floating at its center? A tree made of names. Tens of thousands of names. Burned, etched, carved. Some were already unreadable, erased by time and fear. And from its limbs dangled the forms of people half erased. Not bodies. Not souls. Just echoes. One turned slowly and whispered without lips. Do you remember me? Another. Did I ever exist? The tree pulsed. The spiral emerged again, carved around the roots in perfect concentric rings. But these spirals spun, slowly, endlessly, like whirlpools in ice. Caleb whispered, we're standing in the memory of the forgotten. And then, the voice came. You feared being forgotten, so you buried your pain in roots, you buried your joy in lies, you buried your truth in silence. Now you come to the end. Now you choose, remember all, or lose yourselves forever. Ellie stepped forward and screamed. Not in fear. In defiance. I remember every name we lost, every face, every moment the forest tried to take. She pulled a bundle from her coat. It was a book, worn, handwritten, pages filled with names. People she had met. People the spiral tried to erase. People she swore she'd never forget. Caleb added his own. Together, they opened the book and laid it at the base of the tree. The tree shuddered. And then, blossomed. From its branches burst memory. Light. Voices. Laughter. Grief. Truth. All of it. Every forgotten soul sang. Every echo remembered. Every root in the world shook. They woke back at the camp. The sky was burning gold. Soren stood nearby, smiling, whole. You did it, he whispered. Caleb turned to Ellie. And for the first time, they felt it. The spiral was closed. Not destroyed. Not dead. But at peace. Because someone had remembered. Epilogue. Years later, they returned to Elkridge. The forest was still there, still wild, still whispering. But it no longer hunted. Instead, it waited, quiet, ancient, listening. And on the edge of town stood a library made of stone and bark. Inside, thousands of names. Stories. Memories. And in the center, beneath a glass case, sat one burned bracelet. And a single page that read, "To be remembered is to live forever. To be forgotten is to feed the dark." We chose to remember. The end. Unless you'd like an epilogue, a spin-off, or a return of the spiral.